I'm Mike O'Loughlin, Executive Director of Outreach. We're committed to celebrating the LGBTQ Catholic experience, publishing essays, articles, and resources each week on our website at outreach.faith. We are excited to bring you a variety of conversations with LGBTQ Catholics discussing a range of topics important to our community. Greg Krajewski, a gay filmmaker based in Chicago, developed this project for Outreach. Hey, Greg.
Hey, Mike.
Greg, I'm curious, how do you live out your faith currently?
Oh, boy. Currently, I'd say, like any busy person, I struggle with finding time for prayer. That's something that it's been kind of like my Achilles heel for my whole life. There have been times that have been better, but right now it's hard to find that time. I cantor at my church, which really makes me feel more connected to the liturgy and to what's happening in the parish and what's happening during the Mass. I really want to find time to do a retreat. I'm struggling to find that time. Same problem. But overall, I'm really trying to be more active in how I relate to the world, how I live my faith out in the world. That's something I'm really trying to do pretty actively.
Yeah, it's not easy with so much demands on our attention, so many different people and organizations competing for our time. But I know that for me, just finding a parish where I can really make time to end my weekend, I go to Sunday night Mass, has been a really important point for me to kind of ground my faith. And I know it's not always easy to find those spaces, but when you do, it's important to hold on to them. And I know you'll be touching on some of that today. Who are you talking to today, Greg?
Yeah, today I'm going to be talking to Brent Taghap, who is a musician. He's a violinist who lives in Chicago. And he's really active in the Chicago Archdiocese Gay Lesbian Organization. I actually met him at Outreach's conference last year. So shout out to the conference, where he was really lending his skills to help elevate the liturgy and other programs as part of the conference. I was really struck by his ability to kind of embrace both sides of himself, his queer side and his Catholic side. So I actually interviewed him in person in his apartment, which was decorated with all these Catholic icons and relics. There was this beautiful display of Catholic relics that he had from different saints. And he also had all of this art in his apartment that was from LGBTQ artists. It's just really interesting and a beautiful combination of these two sides of himself.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoy the interview. And if you like what you hear, visit our website at outreach.faith, where you can learn more about the Outreach Conference, sign up for weekly gospel reflections from Father James Martin, and get connected with our resources. Now, our discussion with Greg and Brent.
When I was attending Catholic elementary school, once a week, we all would, as a student body, walk single file across the parking lot to the church where the music minister would teach us the songs that would be sung at that week's all-school Mass. I loved the 1990s era Gather hymnal. On Eagle's Wings, We Are Called, Gather Us In, all the Catholic millennial bangers. I joined the youth choir, and from time to time I'd even sing with the full choir alongside my mom and sisters. I continued this through college in Chicago, where I'd sing with DePaul University's student choir. I loved singing in church. It made me feel really connected to the liturgy, like I was actively participating and that my presence mattered. After college, I came out and shrunk away from that active ministry. I didn't want to draw too much attention to myself, afraid of rejection if I came out. Basically, my non-professional Catholic life diminished. In the same way I lived half in the closet, my relationship with my local church became very private and somewhat transactional. Going to Mass provided me an opportunity to sit with God and receive Jesus. And in return, I attended, I sang in the pews, and I sent in my donations. It took years to start opening up again. My husband and I moved to a new neighborhood in 2017, and after 4 years of attending the local parish, someone in the congregation tattled to the choir director and he roped me into cantoring. I'm finally beginning to feel like I'm contributing to my local parish and slowly opening myself up to the community. I find a sense of joy and community in cantoring, even if I still mostly keep to myself. I met Brent Taghap at the Outreach Conference in 2023. Outreach is a Catholic LGBTQ ministry founded by Father James Martin that provides resources and support to the community. Brent was one of the musicians. a violinist that played alongside the choir made up of participants. I wanted to know more about his experience with the church, as someone who unapologetically identifies as a member of the LGBTQ community, yet is so visible and active in ministry. I met him at his apartment in Chicago. As soon as I walked in, I was met by a beautiful shrine filled with various saint relics.
My name is Brent Taghap. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm a Filipino-American musician and queer Catholic.
To start out, I'm just curious about your background. Like, how did you get into music? What got you into it?
I started playing the violin when I was 5. Originally, I wanted to be a harpist, but like my mom was like, where am I going to find a harp teacher in like small suburban Florida? So I picked violin because, on like those PBS channels, they have those little kids playing violin on like some like late night show. And I was like, that looks pretty cool. Let's start. In high school, I was like, okay, I actually want to do this like in college. And so like studied at Florida State for my undergrad, and then I moved to Chicago in 2017 to do my master's and artist diploma at DePaul, and then I never left.
I never left Chicago either, so I totally understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I also I love Florida, but like, I don't know, I like being a city girl. So,
what was your relationship with music in the church?
I started playing in the church maybe rather late. My thing at church was I was an altar server, because I love wearing a dress. So, and I like the smoke and drama and quite literally the bells. So it wasn't until maybe high school, and at that point I was altar serving since second grade, where a teacher of mine started playing at my church, and she was like, "Why aren't you playing?" And to the music director, she was like, "You do know that Brent isn't a pretty good violinist," and so I just started playing. As I was preparing for this interview, I was just thinking a lot about how I've encountered so many gay music directors at various Catholic churches. And as you said, the arts, and particularly the arts within a liturgical setting, is just sort of maybe I'm going a bit too far, but saying historically it's always been a safe place for queer people in the church, thinking about Michelangelo and composers who also wrote for the church who are also queer. But, in my own experience, they were the people running the show. They were in positions of respect and admiration. I don't think they were hiding. I think it was fairly obvious, thinking about them being maybe a little more on the femme side too. So, but people never said anything. It was always that was such a beautiful service. Thank you for putting together the music for this mass or for this choir concert. So yeah, I feel I came into playing in the church rather late. I also, when I moved to college, I found that was another easy way to connect with my church community there. When I moved out of my hometown, was playing at my church in Tallahassee, which was St. Thomas More. And then also when I moved here, it was also not only a way to get connected to the parish community, but it was an excellent way to network. And so I was getting gigs, weddings, funerals, and baptisms, and then outside gigs as well, also run by queer music directors, coincidentally. So,
isn't it funny? In my previous job, I wasn't out publicly to my clients that I would work with, but I feel I'm not hiding.
Yeah,
people can tell, but they apparently can't. I think there is a certain Catholic, they just assume that oh, he's just a nice little single straight boy who just needs to find the right girl or something.
Yeah.
So from an early age, how did you see yourself? How did you view yourself when you were young in that situation?
I was one of those boys that was always hanging out with the girls. I didn't like how rough the boys were. I didn't like sports. I would much rather hang out with my girlies on the swings, or I always knew there was something a little bit different about me, but only because it was told to my face, why are you hanging out with the girls? I was I don't know. I thought this was totally normal, and I feel that's a common queer experience. We don't know we're gay, but other people seem to already know, and then they sort of don't give us a chance to be okay, this is what I am, in high school especially, that was really hard for me because I went to an all-boy Jesuit high school. I didn't want to go. I tried my hardest. I failed the entrance exam on purpose. They made me go to summer school, and In retrospect, I ended up having such a great time. My entire group of friends all came out by senior year. We all just like found each other. So like, it's one of those moments where I was like, okay, like low-key, this is probably like divine providence, you know, like I was supposed to go here and like undergo these certain things and understand who I am through like this context. But yeah, I feel like I've always been the boy with the limp wrist who is not athletic and who's more soft-spoken than the other boys.
Like when I was in high school, everyone was aware that there were gay people and there were lesbians, and I had gay and lesbian friends. But it was still kind of like, oh, like something unique and different. Did you face any resistance when you started coming out? When did you start coming out, and what was that like for you?
Mm-hmm. I came out, I think like it was either the beginning of my senior year or the end of my junior year. And I feel really, really, really lucky that it was met with little to no resistance. And I remember in my head, it was so nerve-wracking. And like looking back, I was like, I don't know why I needed to be nervous because two of our friends were already out. And also thinking about like the other students who were like in grades above us who had graduated at that point, but were already out. So like gay students at like my all-boy Jesuit high school were not uncommon. Also thinking back about, we had two novices who were queer. One who actually lives here now is no longer a priest or a Jesuit. He like left after the novitiate. But one who went to continue, took his vows, and now he's a Jesuit somewhere. For my family in particular, it was fine. Like they knew. They were all like, oh, we kind of knew, you know? And also I think I was very lucky for two other reasons. One, like my uncle was already out, and like my family like totally accepted him, and he'd always bring his partner to like family things and stuff. And I always think it's funny looking back as a kid, I never connected the dots. I was like, oh, that's Uncle Ed's partner. Like it never like, I didn't bat an eye. And so, yeah. And then I also have several other queer cousins, one who is trans. And so like within the family, it was like, you know, not a taboo subject. And then also thinking culturally within Filipino culture, like even though it is such a Catholic country, like we have gay people in prominent media positions, game show hosts, celebrities, and movie stars and stuff like that. So I feel like all the variables were in place to allow me to come out, and like it was still nerve-wracking, you know? Like I remember like that like choking like before I was trying to say the word, and like my parents were more concerned because they knew that it's a hard life. There's my grandma, you know, she already has a gay son, and so she was like, you know, she's like, I love you. And her thing was like, just like don't run around in your underwear. And I think she was like thinking about those like footage of like pride parades where you see like go-go boys and like thongs on floats and stuff, and I was like, okay grandma, I promise I'm not gonna like run around with like my butt hanging out or something like that. So yeah.
I never really realized how Catholic my family was until I was in college. Growing up, we would go to Mass every Sunday, and we would pray the rosary together. We had Sacred Heart icons around the house. Two of my sisters at one point were discerning consecrated life, and my dad is a deacon. After I fell out with my family shortly after I started dating my now husband, parts of the Catholic experience started to sour for me. I was recently meeting with my spiritual director and kept getting stuck on this idea of piety. For so long, I experienced the people of the church through my immediate family, who I now struggle with, or through my job working for Catholic media. As I explain it, if you're a Catholic in America and have the drive and the money to hire a video company, you're probably going to fall on the conservative side of things, not affirming of the married life that I lead. I would have interactions with clients who spoke a holy game, but caused harm in ways they couldn't always see. The beauty present in traditional Catholic culture, churches, the statues, icons, and prayers, I found can be tainted by negative experiences with those who are their biggest proponents. It's hard to find places where the traditional practices of the church interact in a positive way with my queer side. I asked Brent about these two sides of him. How does he reconcile these two parts of himself? Why is he still Catholic?
I feel like I need to start by saying, like, I've always felt like very, very much at home in the Catholic Church. I think especially in Filipino culture, like it's just part of growing up. Like you going to mass, and I was in the Catholic school system from pre-K all the way through senior year of high school. So I was very much just completely enamored by it and like in love with Jesus. And so then when I came out, I think I also started reading more into things and like trying to understand like why it wasn't like okay. And that is never a happy experience. You read this like really insensitive, dehumanizing language about being intrinsically disordered and stuff like that. And so I feel like in college, that is when I feel like I wasn't as active in my faith. I still went to mass every Sunday, but I also have memories of like going in and like the preacher would just be like putting gay people on blast and having to leave because I was like, I'm not like able to like focus and it feels not great. Very, very recently is when I've sort of been like, I'm just gonna lean into it like I did when I was a kid. And it's felt amazing. I think it was maybe like a year or two ago Mother Cabrini is also very much tied into this. And that's why I very much hold her in high regard as like a queer Catholic. I had just started wanting to be more active. And so that started out with a New Year's resi of wanting to do the rosary before mass every Sunday. And that was it. And so I was like, okay, that's nice. Like, let's see what else I can like add on. And then I saw that they had weekly adoration at the shrine, which is like a 15-minute walk, just, by the, like just down the street. And so I started going and I was not familiar with who Mother Cabrini was. And it's a gorgeous space, and it's basically the hospital that she had founded, Columbus Hospital, is the spot of where it used to be, and it's now a luxury condo. But the chapel of the hospital has been maintained, as well as the room where she had died in, and it's been recreated as like a small exhibit. And then there's like a chapel where you can go and visit some of her relics and stuff like that. Her arm bone, I think the left one, her left forearm is underneath the altar. It's encased in glass, and you can see it. But anyways, I went at a time where there was just extreme like anti like immigration rhetoric, and it was like really, really not great. And, as a child of like immigrants, like I was just shocked at like the language that was being used. And coming to the shrine and like learning about Mother Cabrini and how like she is the patron saint of immigrants and like of marginalized and res people, and how she was like, this isn't okay. Like we have to be helping those who are the least of us, because they're also children of God. And that rhetoric really inspired me, and I think really just sort of like swept me off my feet to really go on this journey of Reclamation era. Like I'm really reclaiming my time, and I'm taking up space. And it was like, and I was like, okay, so I'm going to like be a visibly queer person in a Catholic space. And I don't think that was much of an issue because my church is very, very welcoming. But like still, it was just like, I think it was important for me to be seen and to like be heard, or to like, just be there as a queer person. And like, that was also my first time going to outreach. I had decided that half the battle is just showing up. I didn't know anybody. Like I only vaguely knew of this via James Martin's like Instagram. And so, yeah. So I feel like my Reclamation era has just sort of been, I found it to be incredibly rewarding, incredibly consoling. And I was talking about this with my therapist. It was like, I've like found that like faith of my childhood in adulthood. So it's much more intentional. It's much more mature. And I think the most moving thing was like, you come home. You don't feel like you have stones being thrown at you. Like you're just able to be there. And also like owning and acknowledging like the community that you're in. I don't know these people around me, but like I see them every Sunday and they see me, and we're exchanging smiles and passing glances. And yeah, I think like I have like a queer Catholic alt account, was what I call it. It's called Cabrini Stan. But it's this picture of me as a kid in 1999, and I'm holding all these little statuettes that I had collected from like, various like churches and shrines that we would visit as families, and like I loved it. Like that is the thing. Like I just loved it so much. It felt good to go back to that. And I also feel like, in particular, like I can't not mention like Pope Francis and like the incredible strides that he has made for queer people. And also I feel like, acknowledging that we can put him on blast a little bit because these are very small steps. But also acknowledging that I lived through, Pope John Paul II and, Pope Benedict XVI, who said some nasty things about queer people. And so I feel like when you have someone like Pope Francis, who is such an example of, charity and like welcoming and like love, which I feel like a figure like the Pope should be, like, and like speaking out specifically to queer people, like, I feel like it's incredible. And I feel like it is also really reaffirming, like, on this journey of like actively engaging with my faith.
I personally am I have a really strong sense of like justice in me, which is a double-edged sword, because on one side, I get really frustrated with people who don't understand why I feel like I belong in the church. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that I've butted heads with. More to that, I feel like I understand why they say what they say. So, I'll approach, say, my parents in conversation, and I know that they're going to, I know what they're going to say against what I'm saying and why they think that my lifestyle is wrong or leading me towards hell or whatever else. So I guess, where does your certainty come from?
I feel like, when I first started to, I guess call it deconstruct, which I feel like is, a phrase that is thrown around a lot in terms of people like us in institutions like this. I was looking for those things. I was looking for, biblical, maybe scholarly answers is not exactly like the right thing, but like explanations as to like why I should be able to be in this space. And I feel like the answers I found were, while I think well supported by whatever evidence or verses or articles, they just didn't seem like enough for me. But like the idea that we have innate dignity, period, as people, and that is what gives me the certainty. I'm also, just like a sidebar, I remember I had like thrown that reason at like an Instagram troll, and he said, your dignity has no part in this thing. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense, like in any sort of theological sense, or even just like a logical sense. So I guess for me, the idea that I can't change this, I tried, it doesn't work, you can't pray the gay away. Just the idea that we have innate dignity and that we're all, children of God, which again is like a very Cabrinian idea. Or even like, I don't know, that was the other thing is, I love saints, as you've probably seen by my collection of relics. A lot of the writings of these really heroic people have led me to feel certain about this, to feel like, yeah, of course I belong here. Giving people the benefit of the doubt that they just don't know, they just don't understand that what we go through, or how, it's like one of those things where I wish people could just be in our shoes and like understand it. Because like, why would I like want to choose to live this way and deal with your shit? You know what I mean? And like, it makes no logical sense. Aside from like all the theological arguments and like science arguments, at the end of the day, like I have dignity as a human person, and I know that I can't change this way, and God made me this way. So yeah.
I tell people I've met the best of Catholics and the worst of Catholics,
yeah.
And sometimes they're the same person.
Yeah.
Like I have a lot of friends, they really do want what's best for the world. They really do want to live out their call. I would even say my family falls in that category where they're doing the best they can. They're trying their hardest, but there's just this thing that doesn't connect. How do you think about people in that situation? How do you deal with that when that comes up?
It's not worth your emotional energy to try to convince these people. The way that I'm going to show them is by the example of my own life, And I feel like a much younger me would have been ready to sort of brawl and be like, you're wrong. But like, I don't know. I like pity them in a way. I don't want to exert that energy. And like, it doesn't feel right within my soul to like try to brawl with them. I'd rather just be like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep doing me. And like, hopefully that example will soften your heart. Because I feel like that is such a temptation in like, what is like a very reactive age, is to just be like, well, hold on, like I have the receipts. But like, I don't know, there's so much more better things that I can put my energy towards, And that has also allowed me to sort of like relax my shoulders and lose that tension and go into spaces where I feel, maybe not the safest as like a queer Catholic, and to just sort of live my truth. I feel like that's the only thing, because it's like, if your heart is so hardened and set on the fact that like I'm doing something wrong, can I change that for you? I don't know. But all I know is that I'll be tired at the end of it, and like what will be accomplished? I'll probably be not in a very charitable mood, like probably say some choice words, and that doesn't make me feel good either.
So how do you live your life then? By your own example, will you show them? So what is it you do? How do you try to live your life? What are some things that you do?
Mm-hmm. I just try to be nice. I don't know, because it's not like I'm living my life solely as an example for them. I'm just like doing it. An example could be like my Catholic alt account. Like it's very much just like a diary for me to sort of document my experience as a queer Catholic. And, my policy is delete the hate comments immediately and don't interact. And that has been really great. I'll get DMs who are like, hey, just genuinely curious. Like, can you like explain to me some stuff? And like, I'll try to have a conversation with them, only for them to be like, I still feel like it's not like a good argument. I'm like, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just explaining my view and like my, my rationale and like my thinking behind it. So I don't know. I'm trying to be really kind, and, maybe that's just like the dregs of people pleasing in me that I'm trying to work out still. But also like, I'm trying to be visible as a queer Catholic, not to create any like shock or drama but rather to just be like, yeah, we exist. And like, this is what it looks like for me.
You talked a lot about, these different things that drew you back, the saints or the your experience with adoration or regular prayer. Where do you find joy in the church, comfort, community? Talk a little bit about those aspects, these positive things that church brings you.
Oh, for sure. Let's start with the music. I have always loved like liturgical music. I think, from like the Catholic top 40 bangers, I just love those hymns. I love Marty Haugen. So shout out to Marty Haugen, who has composed so many of these amazing hymns. Studying liturgical music in the context of European history when I was in music school, it's fascinating. It reflects a lot about the history of what's going on in Europe at the time, but also it reflects a lot of theological thought. We go from like Gregorian chant, where it's like a single voice, to polyphonic works of like Bach and Mozart, where it's like multiple voices and stuff like that. And people who are always like, oh, the music was so beautiful at the service today, like it really lifted me up to a special place. I love hearing that. You're playing out of a hymnal and it's very simple music, and sometimes I'm gonna just admit it's just like, oh, okay, it's just like another church gig, but that really brings it back into center. Like you're helping aid in worship. And in particular, my church here, Our Lady of Mount Carmel, I love so much because the music ministry is held in extremely high regard, and it's had such a rich history at this particular church. And every Sunday, I look forward to going to like the 11 a.m. high mass, which is like full choir with organ and sometimes with like orchestra on like the particularly high days like that. The director, Paul French, will program like full mass movements. And I feel like frequently growing up, the priest was like, we got to like keep the music to a minimum. But like, no, like we are standing there for the entire Gloria by like Mozart or like Benjamin Britten. And like he'll choose sort of like weird 20th century stuff, but like it's extremely beautiful because it's well done by like a really dedicated music program. That is a big source of joy for me, is liturgical music. I enjoy playing it. It's very comforting. And I feel like there is a lot that can be sort of like dug into that, from, you know, the psychology of it to like the lyrics of it to like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of really good analysis in that stuff, in that genre of music. Speaking of my own church, Our Lady of Mount Carmel, as you know, is home to Uglo Chicago, which is the Archdiocesan Gay and Lesbian Outreach. It is a small but mighty community of queer Catholics who, you know, gather at the end of the Sunday. We get sort of, you know, the leftover spot at 7 p.m., but it's just a community of really, really sweet people who are both queer and also who identify not as queer, who come because they feel it's a safe space for us to go and worship. And I really just love being part of that and hearing stories from the older generation. Like right now, I feel like I say small but mighty because, you know, our numbers are few, and it comes from a generation that had to face like the AIDS crisis and things like that. And so a lot of them have passed, a lot of them have moved, and it's a constant discussion of how do we attract more like a younger crowd and a younger demographic. That's another example of something in the church that really brings me joy. I guess maybe by extension, I also really love things like outreach. That was such a moving experience for me, especially like since I was able to play with the choir and I was able to like meet you and like all those other really fabulous people through not just the conference, but through the choir in particular. I feel like that was a really profound moment for me, like spiritually. Like I get really emotional thinking about it, like seeing the Church of St. Paul the Apostle, right? The one next to Fordham. And in particular, like during the exchange of peace, like seeing all these people just like hug each other and kiss their partners, and like I'm getting so emotional thinking about it, and it's so beautiful. Like the Holy Spirit was like really there that day. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's another thing that adds to that layer of certainty, is like there is no way that this can be bad. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no way that this isn't in itself, like, also so very holy and sacred.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. You know, I spent 11 years in, like, half in the closet. During that time, I was dating my now husband, and then we got married, and I was struggling with my family. And yes, I had supportive friends, and my in-laws are great, but my daily reality was one of always having to be on edge, that like anything related to my sexuality was something that was not really appreciated in the spaces I was in. And so I still am struggling to be comfortable and confident, and trying to find examples of queer joy and queer community, and a place where I am celebrated for who I am. And I think outreach is definitely a place for that. You mentioned earlier how you're just trying to show up as a queer Catholic, and I think that's enough, you know. But I'm curious, why do you want to do that? Why do you feel like that's important, or that what kind of drove you to that mindset?
I mean, besides the whole idea of quote unquote justifying my life by my example, I want other people to feel safe to come to church. And I want people to maybe question, like, why are you still part of this group, this religion that at times villainizes you? And I want them to just sort of think and like process it a little bit more at a deeper level. I don't think I'm an activist by any means necessary. And like my hat's off to people who are very, on the forefront of activism for our community in general for queer people. But yeah, I feel like my whole thing is like, I just want people to feel safe and I want them to see me and be like, this church is a safe space. Mount Carmel has been serving this community like since it was opened in 1888. So I feel like maybe it's like a reclaiming my space kind of thing as part of the Reclamation era that I'm in. But yeah, I want people to know that they're loved and that like not only me, but this entire building of people is here to welcome you and make you feel safe.
You had given an interview at one point and you had mentioned there's nothing wrong with being gay, which obviously I agree with. But how do you view your sexuality? How do you view this part of yourself?
I would say it's a gift. I've not put much thought into that, honestly. But I mean, like, there is a reason that I was created this way, And I feel like queer people exist. I don't know if there is a reason they exist. I think, God just decides a little extra sugar in the tank for this one. Do you know? I think it is a gift. And I'm also acknowledging that I'm speaking from a very, very privileged place. You read stories of people that are not so lucky to be, a queer person, especially in like a liturgical setting. But in my own life, it has given me the ability to be a little bit more understanding. I don't want to, it's not like, I hate when people are like, oh, that's your cross to bear. I'm like, it's not really my cross to bear. Do you know what I mean? It's only a cross to bear because you're being annoying about it. So it's like, I think being a queer person, especially a visible queer person, allows other people to feel more at ease to be themselves. I think that's something in a general sense, not just like a religious or Catholic sense. But I think it also gives you empathy. It allows you to be more sympathetic towards the oppressed and marginalized, I think. Especially like people who are unhoused or people who are poor, maybe because they are queer, Maybe in a way it also sort of gives you a little bit of a tougher skin. So that way, like, you can deal with people who are not really great or charitable about this. And then it gives you like the strength to be like, I understand that you're coming from a place where you don't understand my own experience. And so I'm going to just pour a little bit more compassion into this interaction and experience, which again is easier said than done. I still find times where like, even if I'm like trying to be really, really calm, I'm like shaking. I'm like so upset that like somebody said something to me or said something really homophobic or inappropriate or just rude, like when I go home in particular, and home is Tampa, Florida, so conservative Republican, you hear some batshit crazy stuff from the pulpit and then like it distracts you. I'm thinking about one moment in particular, but then like, this priest said some weird handed stuff about, gender issues. It's always, attacking trans people for like no reason other than them minding their own business. But then like you get to, the part of the mass where, he's preparing for the Eucharist. And you're reminded that this is a flawed human, just like myself, who maybe doesn't know better. And also I feel like I want to say like, I don't think that I'm better or I know better than someone. I just have this insight because I am a queer person. In that moment, that priest becomes Christ, as he's, consecrating the bread and the wine. I mean, like I didn't know this at the moment cognitively, but at that moment it was back to regular programming. Like, oh, I'm at mass again. Like I don't need to like feel triggered because like I'm at this intimate part of the ritual that is what my attention is focused on. We all have people in our lives that are close to us that will say some kind of not great stuff. And we just are like, we give them the benefit of the doubt. Do you know what I mean? And like, I feel like I face that by claiming Mother Cabrini as like a patron for queer people. When I say she's a patron of immigrants and marginalized and oppressed people, queer people are under that umbrella. And like, I'm under no delusion that during her earthly life, she probably would have been like, But like the whole idea that these people who have heroic characteristics and have lived heroic lives are now in heaven with this like full understanding of God's infinite love. They had a sample of it here, but the idea that no, we firmly believe that they're in heaven now, I don't think that they hold on to those beliefs. Their whole like sense of knowledge has just been purified by this union with God. I don't hesitate or second guess myself when I say that. Or like, I feel like another sort of queer icon saint for me is Saint Therese of Lisieux, just in the way that she writes about God and how it's just this like really simple and little way of like connecting with God. It's none of the really deep theological stuff. It's just like, no, like God loves you. And that's enough.
Brent, thank you so much. This has been great to talk to you. I really appreciate the time.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me.
Ever since I started really getting into what it means to be queer and Catholic, the greatest joy I've experienced is meeting and engaging with others who can hold both parts of themselves fully. When I tell people that I'm gay and married and Catholic, eyes open up in wonder. Is that even possible? My hope is that people like Brent and me are able to show the world that Christ lives in us, in LGBTQ people. And that expression will bring more people to the joy that's present in both queer communities and in the Catholic Church. Before we wrap up, I have Brent's recommendations for you.
I think everyone should see the Cabrini movie, which just came out. They really not only captured like the character of Mother Cabrini that I had in my own head from reading her biographies and stuff like that, but they had captured the time that she was in, and I feel like they did it really well. Another book that I really, really enjoyed was Dorothy Day's biography of Saint Therese of Lisieux. It was so good. I feel like A Story of a Soul, which is Saint Therese's autobiography, is quite good, but I feel like the way Dorothy just like also works in some like commentary about the Catholic worker in it, about her work with the marginalized and oppressed, just works really, really well with that. I just thought it was so good.
This interview was written, produced, and edited by Greg Krajewski, who also composed the music. Special thanks to Maxwell Kuzma. If you like this interview, consider supporting Outreach so that we can bring you more content like this. Visit our website, outreach.faith, to donate today. Thank you.